I call this the night blossom, and to understand what's special about it, I'm going to have to turn off these lights for a minute. With the lights off, you can see that the night blossom glows. And this isn't your typical phosphorescent material that you charge up with a light and it just glows for a few minutes in the dark. The night blossom will glow like this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for decades. And that's because it has a little secret. The night blossom, a simple 3D print, not unattractive. The secret is it's radioactive. I'm sorry. That song is going to be in your head for at least a week now. Maybe you were expecting Imagine Dragons, but 80s for the win. How did I get the idea for the night blossom? Well, a couple years ago, I drew my sister-in-law in our family's Secret Santa, and this was going to be a challenge. She is basically super smart, MIT grad, PhD, techno executive, scientist, creative person, and I really wanted to get something unexpected or special for her. So I asked my wife, what are her interests? And she said, flowers. That was not going to be a lot of help to me. So I just remember I was out cutting the grass and thinking about what could I make? What could I make that would be special? And I was also thinking, what is she likes flowers, but you know, at the time she was working heavily with silicon photonics. So I thought maybe something with light or with optics or something like that. And I remembered I was thinking I had seen these tritium, tritium.
I've heard it both ways.
We'll go with tritium vials. And maybe that could somehow, I could do something special with those because not a lot of people have seen those. Quick detour for a second. What is tritium? Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen, and basically it throws off electrons, which if you put it in, so if you have a little vial, a tiny little vial, and the inside of that vial is coated with a phosphor, and you put some of this tritium gas, hydrogen-3, inside there, and it's throwing off these electrons, aka beta particles. Forgive my crude physics here, but beta particles, basically, you know, high-speed electrons are flying off this gas as it decays. It hits the phosphor, and depending on the phosphor, it glows. This is not dissimilar to how a cathode ray, a CRT, a cathode ray tube works. And now I realize if you were born after 2000, you don't know what a CRT is. A CRT, hey, that's what TV used to be. The CRT used to be how we watched our television, and it was also an important part of the domestic feline's habitat. Anyway, basically you had a cathode at the back of, you had a giant piece of glass. Usually the front was either cut from a spherical section or a conical section if you had a Sony Trinitron, and there would be a tungsten wire, a tungsten element in the back. It would heat up a cathode. It would fire off these electrons. You would steer that electron beam towards the front of the glass, which again was a vacuum because you didn't want the electrons to hit the air. You wanted them to get all the way to the phosphor, and they would hit it, and they would glow, and you would use these deflection coils, basically this magnetic field, to steer that beam back and forth line by line, and you would get the the pixels on the display. And they were huge and warm and heavy, and they would emit a very high-pitched tone. You couldn't even get I think I had a 35-inch Mitsubishi. But anyway, they were huge. That was like kind of the limit, like 40, 45 inches. That was as big as they could get. And at that point, there was so much glass, and it had to be strong to withstand the vacuum, super heavy. Where was I? Oh, yes, the tritium vials. So that's how they sort of work. Very similar in the sense of electrons hitting a phosphor. And depending on the type of phosphor that's lining that vial, then you get a different color. Typically, these colors there are varying brightnesses depending on the type of color that you're getting. Typically, your green, your yellow, and then I think followed by your white are going to be some of the brightest. Let's also just quickly talk about luminescence, things that glow. So that would be radioluminescence, when it's basically radioactivity that's responsible for the light, the production of the light. You've also got bioluminescence, like fireflies. That's technically a form of chemiluminescence, luminescence through chemical reactions. You've got fluorescence, which is like when you shine a black light on certain minerals and they glow, but as soon as you remove the light source, the glowing stops. Phosphorescence, that's your typical glow-in-the-dark material. It absorbs light and then releases it at a slower rate. You turn the lights off and it glows for a little bit. There's a luminescence that you get from crystals. Crystal luminescence? I don't remember. There's like a mechanical luminescence. Anyway, it glows, and again, it's a small amount of radioactivity. It's completely harmless. These beta particles, I think they only basically can travel like a few millimeters in the air before they dissipate. They're not even powerful enough to penetrate the outermost layer of human skin. If you did crack one of these vials, it would just dissipate into the atmosphere. Don't eat them. That could take a couple of weeks to get out of your system. But basically, in the air, they would just naturally be absorbed into the atmosphere. So tritium vials also used in things like in watches, because since they don't need to be quote unquote charged, they're glowing all the time. They're great for watches for people that work like military or pilots or things, because they glow all the time. You'll sometimes see them in like a rifle sight, exit signs. They've been incorporated in a few different things. The vials are typically very small, like maybe only a millimeter or two, thick, and maybe, depending on size, maybe 5 to 25 millimeters long. You can just sort of see in the petals here of the night blossom some of the vials. And I think also if you look at the bud there in the middle, I have some super tiny ones that I've put in the middle. And also my keychain here. I have a vial in there just so I don't lose my keys at night. Once I had the idea that I was going to do something with these tritium vials and make some kind of flower, I went into Fusion 360, and this was the first prototype. This was the first result. So a little bit of a difference from V1 to, I guess this is technically V2 here, V3, actually V3 probably. So yeah, I thought I was just going to get different size vials and glue them here. I realized that was not really going to be as safe or kind of aesthetically as interesting as I wanted. So I went into Fusion and I sculpted some more organic shapes, sculpted the little stem holder for it here in the background. And how basically it works is each one of the petals here is an individual piece. They have an opening to slide in the tritium vial. And also at the bud here in the center, you can actually slide in 5 really, really tiny vials in there, and you glue them all together so they're permanently adhered in here. It doesn't even, I drip a little glue in there so the vials themselves, it doesn't shake around or make any noise, and then glue the back on. That was the physical design of it. Let's talk a minute about just the manufacturing process here. There are 2 ways to make it, and the first way I made it is with an FDM or a filament printer. And basically you can, what I did is took some clear filament, printed all the pieces out. The stem was a little bit hard because it was so long. And the next part was for the different colors, and again, I opted for white and yellow because I thought that was more like a daisy. More natural, but I could have picked other colors, and those being also, again, some of the brighter colors. So then after I printed it out, lightly sanded the parts down. For the bud, I actually, because I really think it was like a millimeter or a millimeter and a half thick to slide in those vials. My printer wasn't quite able to make these clean holes, so I actually had to kind of drill it very carefully out just to get nice clean openings to slide in the tiniest of the vials. Anyway, I took some epoxy pigment and some of this 2-part art resin. I mixed it up, and I gently brushed it all over. So obviously for the different petals and green for the stem. And then after I had colored all the pieces with this coating, I glued them together, and then another couple of clear coats on the outside just to make it nice. Now later on, jumping ahead a little bit, my wife actually was maybe a little skeptical about how this was all going to work out. When she saw it, she thought it was really cool and she wanted one. And at that point I decided maybe I had my first resin SLA printer at the time. So I thought a different approach I was going to take for a little bit higher resolution was to use some clear resin. Again, I tinted the resin with the epoxy pigment and printed it out. And that worked well also. So this is compatible with either type of printer. There were some differences though. I think just by nature, the FDM printer, the parts, because it's melting this plastic, the parts were a little bit more cloudy, which maybe made the light from the tritium vials kind of, it spread it out a little bit more. I think it was, that had an interesting look to it. The resin was almost too clear, I thought. So I kind of lightly sanded it down because I didn't want you to see the vials, right? You want the light to sort of be diffused inside. So I actually sanded a little bit of that nice clear finish away on the SLA printer, on the resin printer. But again, I glued it together and still gave it a protective coat of epoxy over the over the hole. Here it is over here. This is the one that was printed on the on the resin printer. So what happened to the first one when I gave it to my sister-in-law? When she opened it up on Christmas, I had packaged it. I had done sort of this Apple-like packaging, put it in a nice box, put the radioactive symbol over there to make it scary, dangerous. But when she opened it, she basically said, "Best present ever." And isn't that the greatest thing to hear when you make something unique for someone? So that was really cool. I just wanted, one other thing to mention is with my wife's version, because I did leave the center, even though I sanded the petals down a little bit, I did leave the center more clear. So I just thought it was neat how you could see the little individual tritium rods in the middle there. So it is a little difference between them, but really it's up to your mind and creativity, what colors you want to make it. And of course, these are just my files, which will be available. See the link in the description. But of course, you can certainly use this concept and design your own, more petals, less, different layers, maybe make the stem light up as well. I will mention that tritium vials can be a little bit hard to get. I'll put a link to the site that I use in the description as well. And they can be a little expensive. I think at the time I'm recording this, probably to make a flower like this one, a little bit over $200. But when this was on, my wife has this on her, she has this on her dresser. And again, when we go to sleep at night, I just see it just softly glowing there. Sometimes I wake up at night and I just look over at it. It's really cool. And when you think that this will probably glow for about 20 or 30 years, I never mentioned the half-life of tritium is about 12 and a half years. So that'll easily glow for the next 20 years, 30. It'll get progressively dimmer, but I think it'll still be nice for a couple more decades. Anyway, it's a really cool present in the grand scheme of things that that it's super unique, and that it lasts so long, I think makes it really special. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, please hit subscribe. The files are on my site to make a night blossom, so go out, build it, and be active. Don't be afraid that it's